morning, everybody. Welcome to Blue Ridge Story Space. We're so glad you're here, and this might be the most crowded we've been at the Junebug Center, which makes me really happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
As Jane and I were on our way here tonight, we can't believe this is the 12th Blue Ridge Story Space. We will, actually no, it's the 11th. So in January, we'll be celebrating the 1-year anniversary, which is very difficult to believe, but also really exciting. This started out as just a little idea that I mentioned to some of my colleagues over here at work, and I thought, you know, maybe this would work, maybe it wouldn't work. I was involved in something kind of like this in Atlanta, so I can't even really say with honesty that this was my idea, nor really Jane's idea. We got together and talked about it, and we incorporated something that was really already being done in Atlanta. And even before that, already being done with NPR's The Moth Story Hour and Moth events all over the country. So we're very, very grateful that you're here. I do see some new faces here, which is also really exciting. So the way we work is this is a local storytelling event, and every month we always meet at the same time, same place. We have a different theme every single month. This month's theme happens to be the gift, which we thought was really appropriate for the holidays. And I'll share next month's theme at the end before we all part. But what we do is we have a hat right up here, and the hat will circulate several different times during this night's event. And you're welcome to put your name inside the hat if you'd like to tell a 5 to 7 minute story. And so what we do is we take the names, we mix everything up, and we just pick names. And so hopefully we'll have enough people tonight where 10 individuals will have an opportunity to tell their story. We do have a timer. We're grateful to Beth Ford. She's always our timekeeper. And so we're not going to get up here and ever drag anybody from the stage, not to worry. But we do believe in equitability, so we want to make sure that we do have time for 10 different people to tell stories. So what will happen when you come up is that after your story is 5 minutes long, this is what you'll hear. Very gentle shaking of the maracas. When 7 minutes is up, again, nobody's going to come and whisk you away, but you'll hear this. Perhaps a little more aggressive shaking of the maracas. That doesn't mean if you're not finished that you have to just stop and sit down. It just means finish quickly so we can, you know, pay respect to the next person who would like to get up. And we don't have citizens here filming tonight. Sometimes we're lucky enough to have our local TV station here, but they have sent the equipment. So Emily's kind of in charge of a lot of different things tonight, including concessions. And so if you'd like to be filmed tonight, you will have that opportunity. And Jane over here is going to be in charge of just getting you to sign a little waiver, just saying, I understand my story could be aired. You certainly don't have to do that. There's no requirement at all. But if you'd like to do that, what's really cool is we have our own YouTube channel. And so citizens, they are just wonderful, and they professionally edit this tape. And so it's available. You can send it out to all your family and friends who cannot be here. So we'll get started in just a minute. I know Emily wants to say a couple things about, especially something that's happening after this show.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily Gruber, the director here at the Junebug Center, and I just wanted to kind of thank you for being here. This is amazing, and we're so happy to host this event. And also a little bit about the Junebug Center. We do after-school programs for kids K through 12th grade, and they are STEAM and performing arts based. And so in the next month, we will be having their presentations, which is open for the community to come out and see what we're doing. So the week of December 10th, we'll have something that Wednesday through Friday, and we have classical strings performing. We will have a holiday musical theater event, as well as on Thursday is our Acting Out, which is young actors are doing a play. So come out, support that if you want to. It's all free. And what we do for the concessions that you're buying, all of that goes towards our after-school programs. We give scholarships to kids that are on the free and reduced lunch plans, and based on their household income. So we have 150 kids this semester, which is amazing. So hopefully next semester we have but after this, stick around. We have a really special performance today, and they just reached out to me. She's willing to do this for free, and she comes from New York, right? Is that right?
Oh, she lives in Berlin.
She lives in Berlin. She has performed in New York before.
This show was shown in New York.
All right. Yes, so this show was shown in New York. It's Sound and Visual Poetry by Korean choreographer In-Kung Lee. And so she'll be here. It will start at 8 o'clock. It's going to be dark, so she'll be filling in people at 7:30 to come in. So stick around. It's going to be great. So thank you so much for coming and enjoy.
All right, we will get started with our first storyteller of the night, Ann McConnell. All right, Ann. Are you okay with the videos? Sure. Okay.
Nelson, my husband, and I were coming home late one night, and we realized that we needed milk for our breakfast the next morning. In 1972, about the only store open after 9 o'clock in Stewart was the Hop In downtown. So Nelson pulled into the parking lot, and there weren't many people there. It was late, as I said. So as he was getting out of the car to go in, I was going to stay in the car. As he was getting out, he said, "Do you want anything?" And I said, "No, just surprise me." So he goes into the store, and he's not gone very long, comes back, and as he gets in the car, he hands me the brown paper bag with the milk in it. So I reached down to find out what my surprise was going to be, really hoping it was a candy bar or a Coca-Cola. But what I felt, it was wrapped in, it didn't have any cellophane around it. I couldn't really tell if it was wrapped in something or not. It actually felt like wood. Like, what in the world has he done? And I pulled it out and looked at it, and it was a mouse trap. And I looked at him and I said, "Really? A mouse trap?" And he said, "Well, you said surprise me."
All right.
I'll try and keep this within the time limit. My friends here have already heard this story. The gift, we'll start right out with that, was $1,000. 2006, for our 40th anniversary, I was dead broke. My business had down the tubes in Michigan. It was a terrible year, and my son and his wife gave us $1,000 for our anniversary. Probably thinking we'd use it on bills or something important. So we asked them, "Do you mind if we use this to go to Bike Week?" Well, you know. So if you don't, March in Daytona is the big motorcycle thing, 500,000 motorcycles. So they said, sure, that'd be fine. So shortly before we went down, a friend of ours on the chat line for the motorcycle group we belonged to mentioned a place in Meadows of Dan for sale, a little double wide on a couple of acres on the Blue Ridge Parkway, Meadows of Dan. And we had never been to our friend's house anyhow, and it's on the way to Daytona from Detroit. So we said, well, let's go look. We've never been to her house. We want to see it. So the house had not been listed. It was just word of mouth thing. So she talked to the people and arranged for us to look at it when we got there. We had no money. I mean, no, I don't mean like we had money we didn't want to touch. I mean we had no money. So I called a realtor and I said, I want to see 3 places under $100,000. This place was $75,000. So we got down a day early. We went to the realtor in Galax. They showed us 3 places. Crap, worst crap, and holy crap. Did not have high hopes for this. So the next day we came out, we go to the place, beautifully kept little place, 2.5 acres, right across from Mabry Mill, bordering the parkway on the other side of the parkway. And of course it's like, wow, would this be cool? So we said, well, we can't do anything, we have no money. So we said, can we think about it? Not knowing what we would do, but can we give you a deposit? No, don't worry, it's not going to be listed. So we're going to head down to Daytona. We made it all the way across the street to Mabry Mill, and my wife said, pull in. She said, the next person that walks in there would be crazy not to buy this place. I said, I know, hon, but we're broke. We have no money. Well, she says, I had us pre-approved for a equity loan on our house because it's paid for that would cover this. Oh, really? I said, and what are we going to give them for a down payment? She says, a credit card check. So we turned 15 minutes of deliberation, turned around, gave him a credit card check. We have no idea how we're going to make these payments. My work is horrible. But we just felt we had to try it. We had to try it. So they were in shock that we turned around and came back and said, yeah, we want it. Especially when we told them how broke we were. Anyhow, so now we continue on the bike week. We're renting a house with friends who know we're broke, and we say, yeah, we bought a house on the way to bike week. They said, so for 2 weeks we're down there going, what have we done? What have we done? So we looked at the place on the way back home to get our minds wrapped around what we had done. You have to understand, in Michigan, 2006 was when the brakes went on. Everything just screeched to a halt. It's why my business? I'm a sign painter. Everything stopped. There was 3 vacant houses on my block that people had just walked away from. I clean up around the house. Well, first we got the equity line. We came down, paid for this house, went back, cleaned up around my house, put it on the market, and sold in 1 day.
Wow.
In 1 day, with vacant houses all around me. And that was it. We had 30 days to get out of there, which we were total panic, terrible. It's a whole other story, the ride down with the overloaded moving van towing a car. But anyhow, so it came to pass. From that one gift, 12 and a half years ago, changed our lives. It's the second best thing I've ever done in my life besides marrying my wife. Was come down here. And being a motorcyclist, this is nirvana for those of us that like twisty roads. And it just goes to show you, you never know what a gift's going to result in.
Thank you so much. And Greg, before you sit down, where...
I cry a lot. I cry at things like soldier homecoming videos. I cry at books where dogs die at the end. I cry at most movies. In my childhood, notable examples are Ella Enchanted and, let's see, most recently Coco and the Sex and the City movies. I cry when my students get good financial aid packages from their dream colleges. But one thing that recently I was just sobbing at was I listened to the soundtrack to a musical called Come From Away. If you're not familiar with it, it's about on 9/11 when planes that were internationally flying back to the US all got rerouted to Gander, Canada, which is a tiny town in Newfoundland, the furthest east point in North America. And these people who had no idea what had happened were suddenly rerouted and had to stop in this town that they knew nothing of, and spent a significant amount of time, panicked about what was happening back home, but also just trying to make it work while they were there. And I think the reason that this made me as emotional as it did was about 10 years later, a very similar thing happened to me. For spring break, my first year of college, I flew to London. It was my first ever international trip by myself. Bought a ticket, was really proud of myself. It was spring break, and I visited my high school best friend who was studying abroad there. And I was watching the little map that's like on your seat back, and So we, leave the U.S. and we're flying over the Atlantic, and all of a sudden it looked like our plane was facing the other direction. And sure enough, we come on the intercom and said that there was a medical emergency on our plane and that we had to make a stop. So we flew back and landed in Gander, tiny town in Vietnam. And we were on the plane for a while, just on the runway tarmac for probably a couple hours. After a certain point, they said, okay, we're going to let you all off the plane. There were still very few details. So we're just sitting in this empty terminal, just the people on our plane. It's a very small airport. For quite a while with very little information. The medical emergency, whatever it was supposedly being taken care of, but we didn't know really much about where we were, when we would be leaving. Nobody really had cell service because we were in another country, and the payphone was out of order. So everyone was kind of stuck and unsure, and the sense in the room, I had sort of a bit of calm and a bit of like adventure of, oh, this will be a good story when I get back, but I could really tell from a lot of the other people that a lot of people were panicked. You could tell that people had obligations that they were getting to, whether that was family or business meetings or all kinds of things. And so everybody personally was dealing with their own crisis of sorts for their schedule having been upended. And eventually we got a little bit more information that someone on our plane had had a heart attack. They were being taken care of. But because it had taken so long to take care of, we wouldn't be able to fly over to London that night, and they would have to put us up in a hotel. So we all went through customs, this long line of everyone, finally sinking into having a little bit more information, maybe leaving in the morning, but still, dealing with whatever personal crisis that was. And a kid who looked about my age came up to me and said, "Do you go to UVA?" And I said, "Yes, do I know you?" And he said, "No, but it says it on your sweatshirt." He also went to UVA, and was also in his first year, and was from London and was flying home for spring break. And so he and I kind of got to talking and ended up at our hotel rooms were right across from each other, and we just spent this kind of like serendipitous where are we night walking around the outside of our hotel. The most snow I've ever seen, like taller than me, probably 6 to 7 feet of snow on the ground. Everyone we met, from the taxi drivers who drove us to our hotel to the people at the hotel, were as nice as could be. Every possible stereotype of Canadians exemplified there. And when the next morning, they put us on a bus to take us back to the airport. And the mood was just totally different. Like, you could tell from being in the terminal where no one had any information and hadn't yet settled in that this was our new reality, to being on this bus where everyone was well rested and had a chance to call their families from the hotel room, and just had more of a sense of peace about where they were and what they were doing. I remember one guy said, I called my son to tell him what had happened and where I was, and he said, "That's great. As soon as you get internet, you need to watch, Justin Timberlake was on SNL last night." And the flight attendants, instead of their typical flight attendant uniforms, had all bought shirts in the gift shop that said, "I love Gander," and that's what they wore for the rest of the day. So going back to why I think Come From Away made me cry as much as it did, was I think the common thread of all of these things are things that make me realize and understand people's humanity and understanding the relationships that we have with each other and why they're important. And when we're so focused on ourselves and dealing with our own personal crisis, I think there's a lot of fear, or there's a lot of emotion wrapped up in that. But for me, the emotion comes from when we can connect with other people around us, and whether that's in a tiny town in Gander or in Sex and the City when Gary is like, and then she moves away, whatever. But yeah, I'm grateful for this sometimes uncomfortable, but in retrospect, really important gift of feeling emotion in that way.
This is a suling dagung. It is played by Sundanese musicians in the western part of the island of Java in Indonesia. And the Sundanese are their own cultural group, even though they occupy Java, distinct from the Javanese, have their own language, their own musical cultures. And this flute is played in a gamelan ensemble, a very large ensemble of gong chime instruments. This instrument was a gift to me. I'd like to do a little bit of audience participation for a moment. If you could raise your hands as I ask questions and lower them as the answers do not apply to you. So let's start with everyone who's a musician in the audience. Raise hands. Okay. Anyone who plays wind instruments? If you don't play a wind instrument, lower your hand. Okay. And flute players? Okay. Fantastic. Thank you. In December and January of 2001, I was in Bandung, which is more or less the cultural capital of the Sundanese area of Java. But I was not studying this instrument. I wasn't studying the dagung ensemble. I was there to study a performance style called kendang pencak, which is also a musical ensemble, but it's much more robust than the refined gamelan tradition. It includes two long drums that play in interlocking patterns, and then a very loud, audacious instrument called tarompet, which is basically an oboe with a double reed. And this musical ensemble is performed in order to accompany the traditional martial art form called pencak silat. And the interesting thing about this this performance style is that there's this range of movement in the in the martial arts style that sort of borders along dance. And so depending on who the martial artist is and who the musical ensemble is, everything sort of shifts from fighting style into dance and back and forth again. And so I was interested in connections between movement and music, and so that's why I was studying this ensemble. And during the course of my study, it occurred to me that I'd like to have a set of instruments. And so I went to an instrument maker and explained to him that I wanted drums and a trumpet. And he was aghast, because of course he's used to people coming to Java to study gamelan. And he's a maker of gamelan as well. And he kept trying to convince me that no, what I wanted to do was of course study gamelan dagung and to purchase those instruments. But he, in any case, finally relented. And the drums are these magnificent drums that are shaped out of the trunk of a jackfruit tree. So they're very large, and it's a very hard wood. It's an arduous process. I had to come back and forth to the maker several times to see the instruments, to test them as he made them. And again, he kept going on and on about the fact that I needed to purchase a gamelan dagung. And so finally, I got my instruments, I finished my studies, and I was back on my way back home to write my master's thesis in ethnomusicology on kendang pencak. And as a final gesture of trying to convince me that I indeed wanted to study gamelan dagung, he gave me, because I was a wind instrument player, the suling dagung, in the hopes that I would finally relent and study gamelan dagung. And so I've had this with me ever since. 17 years that have elapsed since I've been there. I still play and study and appreciate kendang pencak. I have not ventured into studying dagung. But I've treasured this instrument. I've enjoyed playing it for all those years. But now is the moment that I need to part with it. So.
right here. Okay.
So when I started thinking about the gift, I have to be honest with myself. I'm one that keeps my gifts. I'm very grateful. Hush, Peter. I'm very grateful for things that people give me over the years. And my first thought that came to my head when I was a very young girl, my birthday is exactly 1 month to the day after Christmas. So to me it was the mother lode. I knew I could get what I wanted for my birthday and Christmas. So I did not go through the Barbie doll stage like most young girls did. I went through Kittle's stage. And yes,
I love that.
I have hundreds. I have a tote in my house still that my grandchildren love with the doll houses and the little dolls. And I thought, yeah, that's what I'm going to talk about is my Kittles. Because when I was a young girl, when you grow up around here, you need an escape, you know. And I could build roads. I could go out on the driveway at my grandmother's house, and there was this bank, and we would carve roads in, and I would take my little cars and Kittles, and we'd drive everywhere, and I'd have a whole little town, because I still literally have hundreds of these dolls in a great big tote. But then I was like, but no, then there was more eventful things in my life and gifts that I received as a young girl. And it was it. And then I was like, it's this. It's this. When I was 16, my mother became a single mom. And she had 3 kids, and she had no money. And for a 16-year-old girl, I wanted all the clothes. You know, we were really into flannel and brogans back then. And I wanted what all of my friends had. And I woke up Christmas morning and I had a teddy bear and I had a game because that was all Mama could afford. And, you know, at first it devastated me because I knew all my friends were going to come to school with their new fancy clothes. And I was a 16-year-old girl with a teddy bear, you know, and I had this game. But years later, when my son was born, and he's severely challenged, and he doesn't like stuffed animals, but he likes teddy bears. And he will sit there with his teddy bear singing, "Me and my teddy getting all ready." And he loves his teddy bears. And so he, you know, I was like, you know, it reminded me. And when I became a single mom, and I understood what my mother went through financially trying to raise her kids on her own, the teddy bear became more special. When I hear this sound right here, I think of the night my sister and I played Marathon Yahtzee. We would sit up, we throw all family ties out the window when we play. We get vicious. I've been called every name but a child of God by that girl. Because I'm really good at rolling Yahtzee, you know. So I was like, yeah, that's what I want to talk about, this gift. It was a great gift. But then, what did I say? I know y'all think, my God, she gets a lot of gifts, and I really did. What did she settle on? What gift did she settle on? And it was this gift. This gift. This is the one I got every year of my life for 50 years. I would go, when I was a young girl, my grandfather ate king syrup every meal. Breakfast, lunch, and supper. I don't know how he ate that nastiness because it's some vile stuff. He ate this king syrup. And we lived out in the country where we didn't have garbage service growing up. There was nobody, you know, we had the gully out back. Well, my grandmother would have never put this in the gully because it didn't decompose down. You know, and so then she would end up having to dig another gully, and that's land that's wasted for years until it can. So she kept these, and she used them for everything. If we had to go to the spring, she would send all of us. And for the little kids, she would drill a hole here, and she would let them at least carry that much water back to the house so we could do laundry. Everybody had to carry a bucket. But also, it came at Christmas time. she would take all of these buckets that she had saved, and she had 14 children. She had 48 grandchildren, 72 great-grandchildren, and I've lost count since the 72. I'm the oldest of the 48. But she kept these buckets, and every year at Christmas, she would go, one apple, one orange, because she could not provide for all of us. And she would take, and it would be some kind of little chocolate, and some kind of candy bar. Of course, in my bucket there was always extra chocolates. It was an advantage to being the oldest granddaughter. Then, of course, my peppermint patties. And then there would be some of the other, just odd little candies. And she would fill that thing full, just as full as she could do, every year. Now, eventually it came to the point where the King syrup cans disappeared. We carry them home or whatever, and Grandpa died when I was 12. So there was nobody to any longer eat King syrup, because imagine that it's not a good thing, so I'm sure that's probably got a lot to do with it going its way. But in 2000, I moved back to Virginia, back home, and I still went to Grandma's every year for Christmas. And I had been up in Galax one day doing some shopping, and I went in. We like thrift shops a lot around here. And I went into a thrift shop, and there over in a box that had a bunch of baskets in it was a King syrup can. And it was like my whole life came back, because even though the King syrup cans had gone, my grandma still did this for me every year for 50 years. It went from a King syrup can to a bag. So I bought that can. And then I came back and I started looking at all other antique shops, and I found more. And so my grandchildren now, every year at Christmas, they get a King syrup can. I have more King syrup cans now than I will ever have grandchildren. I think I'm done, and I've got 4 grandchildren, but I probably, kind of like my Kittles dolls, I probably got 100 King syrup cans. But this was always my best part of my Christmas. I'm 56, well, I'll be 56 in January, and for 50 years, this has been my best gift ever.
Thank you so much, Pam.
All of my Meadows of Dan cronies over there want me to tell the story of how my parents met, but that's not the story I'm telling. The story that I want to tell you guys actually is a 3-part story that I'm going to try to fit in 7 minutes. But it's stories of gifts and destruction. So my first part is last year, Kevin up there was wanting to buy a brand new Jeep. So we went on the hunt for a Jeep. He found one. He had a big Dodge Ram pickup truck. I had a '96 Ford pickup truck that was dying. So when he found this Jeep, he said, "I'm gonna give you the Dodge." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yes." It's like, "I'll take it." So, in October of last year, he gave me the Dodge. In December of last year, I totaled the Dodge. Yes, me and the Parkway had an incident, and so I flipped it down a bank on the Parkway. We're texting, and I'm that person that never carries your cell phone charger when you should. So he messaged me, he's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Just wrecked the Dodge." So he texted me back, he goes, "What do you mean just wrecked the Dodge?" I said, "As in I'm standing on the side of this bitch and it's not coming And then my cell phone dies. So So about 10 minutes later, here comes Kevin from his work. He's like, "You're not answering." I was like, "Battery's dead." So he's like, it's frustrated. So there's gift destruction. Fast forward to February of this year. We decided we were going to take a family vacation. There's no vacation without the family. We go everywhere together, my sister and I. So we decided to go to Hawaii. We're going to the Big Island. So in the process of going there, which some of this may shock you, Kevin and I decided we were going to get married. Kevin said, let's get married in Hawaii. I said, sounds wonderful. Sounds like a great idea. So in the process, we had to find someone, and it's kind of easy to get married in Hawaii. You just have to find someone to perform your ceremony. So they have a 4-page list of people to perform your ceremony. So we found this lady, her name was Jerry, and we started emailing with her, and we were like, "Hey, will you do our wedding ceremony?" And she was like, "Sure, I'll be glad to." So she goes, "The only thing I require of you is each of you individually has to email me and tell me why you think you should marry the other one." So I'm like, "Well, you know, that's okay." So I email my part, and I'm like, "Well, I sent Jerry my stuff. Have you sent her yours?" And he's like, "Well, I'm just going to tell her we're doing it for insurance." I said, "Please do not tell her we're doing this for insurance. Please do not." So later on, I tell him, I was like, "When you email that, it better be forwarded to me so I can proofread it." So he wrote a nice little spiel, so give him some credit. He wrote a nice little spiel. So we get to Hawaii. My sister's there, an ex-sister-in-law of mine is there, and one of my sister's friends. So we're all there, and we've never met this lady before ever. And we were going to get married on the property that we had rented there from Airbnb. So in pulls this Volkswagen Jetta with a huge peace sign heart painted on the hood. And I was like, this has got to be her. So she gets out of the car, and I walk out on the front porch, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Trinity." Hug and kiss right away. And I'm like, okay. And I was like, everybody else is inside. Kevin was right at the door. She just walked through the door. She's like, "You're Kevin." Mwah. And he's like, and he does not like the hugging and kissing. So she rolls on into our kitchen where my sister and everybody's sitting, and like, I've not even got in there, and she's hugging and kissing everyone. And I was like, well, that's nice. So she performs a traditional Hawaiian wedding for us, all in Hawaiian dialect. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. We got married in camouflage shorts, so it's not like we really, put a lot of effort into it. So we left, coming home. Next thing you know, the volcano erupts in Hawaii. Kevin swears up and down that we caused it.
The house is gone.
So we come back to the United States. And the very last part of my story ends with just the gift part. There's no destruction. So we come back home, and in the process, none of our families was there with us for our marriage. So we decided to do a fake wedding here in Virginia. So in the process of that, Kevin's like, who in the world, because this, you see where we live. A lot of people don't like the whole man-on-man thing. We were like, who in the world are we going to get to do our wedding? And I was like, Crystal is a great English teacher. So I don't even do it in person. I Facebook Messenger, it's like, hey, we're doing a fake wedding, and we need someone to do it. And she was like, I'm not doing it. However, she's like, Jane may. So we met with Jane, and we had a great afternoon with them, and Jane was like, yes, I will do it. So in March, we had our fake wedding, and Jane did the ceremony, and she did an excellent job. I wish she had flown to Hawaii to be with our other Hawaiians. But the gift was having Jane and Crystal there to marry us again.
That was wonderful. Okay, so my story is starts with me in about, I would say, 7th grade. My family really wanted me to go to this school in Roanoke called Roanoke Community High School. It's like an art school, but it says it's an art school, but I feel like it's more of a college prep school because there's an insane amount of homework. But like, I was kind of reluctant to go at first, and I wasn't really thrilled about it. And then in 8th grade, I went and visited the school, and so fast forward to now, actually freshman year, I auditioned, not auditioned, but like, what's the word, where you like talk to someone, interview, yeah. So I interviewed, I was interviewed by the people at the school, and I got into the school, and it was terrifying because like, I was starting in this new environment, and I didn't really know anybody, and nobody knew me, whereas in Floyd High School, I knew everyone, and it was a really nice environment to be in. And then when I got there, I joined this carpool. And the carpool was me and a group of, let's see, me, Bert, Jonah, 5 kids, including me. And it was really quiet at first. It was pretty awkward because we have to drive in a car for an hour to school every day. And with these people that really didn't know each other at all. And it was scary. So, different topic. Has anybody ever heard of the show Phineas and Ferb? Yes. Yes? Okay, so it's basically this TV show where there's like, there's these 2 brothers, Phineas and Ferb, and they do these things where they build big machines, like a rocket or something, and it's an animated TV show. And they have a pet named Harry the Platypus. Harry the Platypus is a secret agent. That's a fact that is not really necessary, but it's important. Harry the Platypus was my favorite, basically. And Brian, one of the people in our carpool, he had this hat, or he used to when he was in about 6th grade. And it was Harry the Platypus hat. I have a picture of it on here, because I don't have it with me at this time. But this is the hat. It's a very important hat, for a lot of reasons. When we all got into the carpool and we didn't know each other, one of the first things that Brian had talked about was we were driving, and there's this homeless shelter near our school. And when we were walking by the homeless shelter, there's this man, and he's walking down the street, and he has this hat on his head. And Brian says to Bert, someone in our carpool, he says, "Hey, did you know that's my hat?" And Bert's like, "What are you talking about?" And Brian says, "Well, I used to volunteer at this homeless shelter over the summer, and I was serving food or whatever. And then when I left this hat on the table. And when I ran in to go get it, it was gone. And I saw this man, and he was wearing my hat, and he knew it was my hat, and he looked me right in the eyes. And I knew I couldn't take that hat back, and I left. So this man, to this day, has this hat, and he wears it everywhere he goes. This man, we call him Perry the Platypus Man, and he is an omen. If we see him on the way to school, we know our day is blessed by this man. This man is just, I can't say enough good things about this man. So we have like a collective like album of pictures of him. When we see him on the side of the street, we immediately take a picture, and our goal is, by the time we all graduate, to have taken a picture all together with him. And so Brian, one day, he came to school, and he had the same hat. And it wasn't his hat. He had bought another one for the memories. And he was like, "Carpool, come here." So instead of calling our names, we just go, "Carpool!" Assembles. We all assemble, and Brian has the hat, and it's magical. And then Brian says, "I don't really need this hat though. I don't really need it anymore." And I really love hats. This hat right here says, what is it, All-Star Grandpa? I don't know why I like it, but I do. So Brian has this hat, and he's like, I'm never going to wear this. And I was like, I love it. Why would you not wear it? And he says, you can have it. So now I have the Perry the Platypus hat, and I wear it all the time. It's my favorite hat. It has a lot of memories about the carpool. See, I've never been great with having friends. It's always been hard for me to make them. But the carpool is amazing, and it's like, it's such a close group of people that we thought we wouldn't get along at first, and we thought it would be awkward and uncomfortable, but it was so amazing, and it's just amazing that so many people, like 5 different people who are very different, can all be in the carpool together. And after a year of driving, an hour back and an hour there, we can unite over something like a man with a Perry the Platypus hat. And it just makes me so happy. And I'm really grateful for the carpool. And that's the end.
So disclaimers. Firstly, this is a dramatic story, not very comedic, and that's sad because there were so many funny stories. Secondly, I was going to bring props, but I forgot. And third, I forgot. Oh, it's very me, so please excuse me. So my ancestors, at least on my father's side, come from Holland, a small town, a coastal town called Katwijk aan Zee. And at least as far back as the 1620s, probably centuries before, but these people were mariners. They were sailors and fishermen and a fair splattering of captains as well. So they were people who saw the world in terms of nautical miles and knots and headwinds and tailwinds and port and starboard. Fast forward to the 1930s when my grandfather, in what must have been a dramatic hissy fit, decided to leave his family, leave his town, his country, his continent, and move to Johannesburg, South Africa, just about as far away from the sea and Holland and his family as you can get. So when my father, his son, came of age, this calling of the ancestors he couldn't answer. He couldn't go to the sea. There is no sea to go to near Johannesburg. There isn't even a big river, because Johannesburg is one of the only major world cities not founded next to a major river. It is where it is because that's where the gold was. So he took to the sky instead, and he became a pilot. He joined the Air Force, became a pilot, and a pretty good one. So years later, when I was born, I was brought to our house on an Air Force base. And the constant roar of angry jet engines in the background were my lullabies. And my first babysitters were trainee pilots. And by the time I was 5, I was my parents' party trick because I could recite aviation poems, even though English wasn't my language. And by 6, I had to end a friendship with Johan Spies because we were on the playground one day and a DC-4 flew overhead and he said, "That's a DC-3, and obviously I could never speak to such a cretin again. By 9, my father was appointed the officer commanding of a nearby Air Force base. So in the afternoons, when my friends would be playing rugby and cricket and field hockey, you know, real sports, I would cycle over to the Air Force base, and I would hang out in the control tower or the fire station, or I would visit the squadrons and hang out in the crew rooms and listen to the pilots talk their language of knots and nautical miles and port and starboard. And occasionally I would be lucky and I'd be taken for a flight in the transport airplanes and the helicopters. But my favorites were in the kudu. And the kudu was a rickety South African rubbish airplane, known for its frequent engine failures. But I love flying these things because Captain Bucky Smith, when he would take me up, he would let me take the controls. And he would teach me things. So by the age of 10, before I can see over the control panel, I could do a pretty decent wing over in a kudu. And many other maneuvers. So I was very lucky. So I was going to be a pilot. I was already a pilot. I just waited for the qualification. There was no option B. That was all I was ever going to be. So in my final year of school, when my conscription papers arrived, it was no surprise that it was to the Air Force and not the Army or the Navy. And when I was selected for pilot training, again, no surprise. This was the natural course of things. Though in retrospect, it must have been because my dad was a general. So, and about 2.5 years later, after what was an incredibly mediocre academic performance, made up for by the fact that I could, for some reason, do wingovers like I'd been doing them my whole life, I qualified as a pilot. And my father was called up out of retirement to don his uniform one more time so he could pin my wings on my chest over my heart. And that was the greatest gift of my life, because he had given his wing-shaped pig of a boy keys to a wing-shaped world, where I could understand the language and speak of knots and nautical miles and port and starboard. So fast forward to 2004. By then I had spent 13 years in the Air Force. I'd done everything I wanted to do, flown everything I wanted to fly. I'd seen war, I'd made lifelong friends and buried a few. I'd spent 3 years in a company, a special company that of ex-military civilian pilots flying civilian airplanes on military missions in interesting places like Afghanistan, Iraq, the Congo, Sudan, and such other interesting exotic holiday destinations. Mainly for people like the UN and the US government, but not trying to say too much about that. And I'd spend a year in an airline, cushy job, fast track to the captain's seat. It was great. When I started feeling unwell, a general type of malaise, a dizzy feeling. Long story short, one evening, my internist, physician, calls me at home. Bad sign. Physician calls you at home, not good news. Oh my. And he says, I don't want you to worry. Very bad. I want you to go for a brain scan the next morning. So, long story short, they find something called a pituitary macroadenoma, which statistically someone in this room will have experienced. So, if you're ever going to get a brain tumor, that's the one you want, because it's not going to kill you, it's benign, it's relatively easy to remove. However, it did take my wings away. And initially I was put in the office and I was put in charge of recruitment of pilots, and I hated every second until I started realizing, wait a minute, there's more to the world than flying. And that I could be a bridge between these young pilots with a get it right or die life, and the administrators who couldn't tell the difference between the DC-3 and the DC-4. And in time I ended up somehow in an art school with little old ladies and school children. And I loved every second, and I realized, wait a minute, I can paint. And then one day I sanded down an old table of my mother's, and that led me to start doing woodwork. And I learned to do woodwork, and I loved every minute. Now I can create things that I need to. And on days that I was at home and feeling poorly, I would get in my car and drive through my city and be interested about the history. So that led me to reading books and collecting books, and I became a lay historian and a tour guide. And because of that, one morning at Johannesburg International Airport, I met the most amazing person I could ever meet. And by some miracle, she became my wife many years later and married me inside of Kitty Hawk, where the first flight ever took place. Because I was painting pictures and doing woodwork, I started building frames for my pictures, which led me to buy a framing business. So I ran a business for 2 years. And then I became a ground instructor, and I taught young pilots and young cabin attendants subjects that were close to my heart, and it was just a wonderful experience. Almost done. And right now, many years later, I'm finding and growing new roots in this beautiful country with its beautiful people and its crazy mean politics. For now, I am driving buses for Blacksburg Transit, amongst the most overworked, underpaid, and overqualified bus drivers in the world. We have PhDs, we have a cardiac surgeon, we have ex-pilots, we have ex-professors, we have everyone driving for us. My two friends who are with me here today, the one is an ex-successful businessman with a business science degree and a former Buddhist monk. The other one is a geologist who also ran reactors on nuclear submarines. This is the type of people. And every day we carry people who aren't always the most thankful individuals on the earth. And we drive amongst motorists who aren't the kindest or most patient or really very good at driving sometimes. So every day I learn the skills of patience and humility. So in the end, the thing that took away my greatest gift was the greatest gift after all. Thank you.
Thank you, Johan. have you choose the next name.
Can you explain wingover?
Wingover is just basically you pick up speed, you pitch up the airplane, you turn on the wingtip, so it's a turn with the rudder, so full rudder deflection. So, sorry. Let's speak with the hands. This is a stall, and if you go up vertically, you wait for the speed to die out and you fall out of the sky. A wingover is basically the same thing, but you keep the airspeed up. So you do that. So you rotate with the wingtip 90 degrees to the earth.
We did that in an undependable.
It's like Carrie.
Always dragging. I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to come enjoy and drink a beer and listen to fabulous stories. And then I looked down and I was wearing this. So does anybody know what this is? It's World AIDS Day today. So I think we forget about that now a lot. And so I wasn't going to do this. Menopause sucks. You're fine, and then you're a sobbing hot mess. Anyway, I looked down and I saw this ribbon, and we have this. So my partner is 5 years older than me. So, which isn't very much, as I used to teach my kids that scale and proportion, right? So scale, you're always the same, and proportion, you get closer and closer, right? So we get closer in age the older we get. But we have these things that we notice this fine line that affects us in different ways. And so one of those is the AIDS crisis. I'm 52, and Donna's 57, and so she had a much more profound sense of loss in the AIDS crisis as queer people particularly, than I did. But I did feel that, and one of my most profound experience with that is one of my dearest friends who subsequently died from cancer. Brother died from AIDS, and he his mother, he came from Salisbury, North Carolina, which I know it's not the most progressive place in the country. It's where Food Lion came from. Ralph Kettner, rice and grits, dog and kit food. That's what I remember about Salisbury. But anyway, his older brother, who was a big show tunes, you could just name it, quintessential gay man, died from AIDS, and his mother had to come to terms with that in Salisbury, and decided that she didn't want to deny it and didn't want to say things like, my son died from cancer, which is what happened in this part of the world a lot. And so she really was like, no, Mark died from AIDS. And she confronted that in Salisbury, North Carolina in the 90s, which I'm very impressed with. And she decided that she wanted to make a quilt piece for Mark. So I don't know if all of you, most of us are old enough to remember the AIDS quilt. And so June decided that she wanted to make a piece for Mark. And so Fred's like, do you want to go with me? I was like, yeah, I'd love to go and do this with you and your mom and his aunt and whatever. And so it was the last time the whole AIDS quilt was shown in its entirety, because it got too big to be shown. They showed it all the time in the mall, and this was the last time it was shown in the mall in Washington, because it got too big after that. And so Mark was probably the first person I knew who died from AIDS, not the last. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go. And we were in a hotel room, a Motel 6 or something, with June and her sewing machine. And they were finishing everything. We were finishing up at the 12th hour. It was really amazing, actually. And got to go take it and put it on the wall. And it was the most profoundly impactful thing ever. And as a young queer person, I felt comfortable with who I was, and I didn't have a lot of issue with that, but it made me know that
was so important to be who I was. And I did a lot of work after that too. It really made me work more for my community and know what a gift it was to be part of that and to have that sort of sense of awareness and power and strength and oneness. And anyway, it was quite incredible, and so thank you. So.
The last name.
So to start off, hi, I'm Doris. I grew up in Boston. So if you don't understand me, say, hey, wait, what was that? I'll explain it. So the gift is a long time coming. Losing a job, losing a community that had I'm also a crier, so losing a community that was a huge support for me during a tough time in my life, that was leaving an abusive ex-husband, was gone. So what am I gonna do? Pack up my car, move to Florida with my mother. So that's another story in itself, but it kind of gets me to where I am now. Of all the bad things that happened before, could not have led me to where I am now. So between having the training that I had in my old job that had gone away because of budget cuts in a hospital that I worked for, a small rural hospital in Maine, of all places. A lot of things that I learned there, between people having mental health issues, substance abuse issues, just not being well for the whole, outwardly looking okay, but not really being okay, makes me look at things a lot differently than I did even 10 years ago. Being a white female, don't really realize, how much privilege that gives you until you see other people that don't have that privilege. So again, that I want to look at as a gift. But bringing me to where I am now, it's a funny show called It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. If any of you have seen it, you know it's a lot of off humor, definitely not politically correct. It's a website that I met my boyfriend Greg through, and without all of the horrible things that I went through before, being able to see the good in people, even with their foibles and whatever else had happened to them, being able to, go up and above and beyond, whatever was, happening in their life, they overcame it, became, good parents, good friends, good, members of society after a bad, hand that they were dealt. But that's my biggest gift, was losing a job, your biggest gift. But if I hadn't lost that job, I wouldn't be where I am today, with I love my boyfriend Greg and my great friends that you have friends, that you've grown up with, that know your whole story, and then as an adult, it's like, it's not always easy to find friends, people that you connect with, because, you walk up to someone in the grocery store and say, hey, you want to hang out? They'll look at you like, crazy? Like, wait a second, you don't want to come off being creepy or anything, but as adults, you still need friends too, so losing a job, hey, that was my gift. Thank you.
All I have to say is wow. Every time Jane and I leave, we think, okay, it can't get any better than this. And it always does, every single time. And Allie reminded me that I was mistaken in the beginning, this is actually the 12th Blue Ridge Story Space, not the 11th. So in January, on January the 5th, we will officially celebrate our first year anniversary, which is really exciting. So please make sure that you join us again on January the 5th. And we thought that an appropriate theme would be simply beginnings. And that could be interpreted, of course, so many different ways. And it's appropriate for the beginning of 2019 as we all start a new fresh outlook and decide what our goals are, what our dreams will be for the year. Also, please make sure that you like us on Facebook. That's where we do the majority of our announcements. That's where the Blue Ridge Story Space YouTube is also posted. And another thing I want to say is that this place has become even more sacred than I had ever imagined it would be. I always wanted to create a safe place. And I have lots of things in life that I'm really bad at. I think one of the only things I'm really good at, hopefully in the classroom, is creating a safe place for people. And that's one thing to do in a classroom, but it's another thing to try to do with public, with people you don't know, with ever-shifting people coming in and out. And I want to say, I mean, it's not because of me that has happened. It's because of you. So I am so grateful. Thank you for being here, and please keep coming back.